The smell of garlic and basil filled my office as I reviewed the evening's reservations. Moretti's had been packed every night since the review in the Tribune called us Austin's best-kept Italian secret. 5 years of 16-hour days, and Dad's struggling restaurant had become the place to get a table. My phone buzzed. Gerald. Family meeting at the house. 1 hour. I stared at the text. Gerald never called family meetings. In the 7 years since he'd married my mother, he barely acknowledged I was family at all. Just Linda's daughter from her first marriage, the inconvenient reminder that Mom had loved someone before him. Can't, I typed back. Friday night service starts in 2 hours. This is above the restaurant. Be here. My blood chilled. Gerald had been sniffing around Moretti's ever since the Tribune Review mentioned we cleared $500,000 in profit last year. Suddenly, the restaurant he called that pizza joint was worth his attention. I left my sous chef in charge and drove to the house I'd grown up in, the one where Dad had taught me to make marinara sauce from scratch, where the kitchen still had burn marks from my first attempt at flambe. Gerald's Lexus sat in the driveway like he owned the place, which technically he did now. Mom greeted me at the door, her eyes red-rimmed. "Sophia, honey, what did he do?" She couldn't answer. Gerald appeared behind her, all false concern and patronizing smiles. At 55, he looked like what he was, a mediocre real estate agent who'd hit the jackpot when he charmed my grieving mother. "Sophia, come in, come in. We have wonderful news." The living room had been rearranged again. Dad's leather chair was gone, replaced with some modern monstrosity. His awards from the Restaurant Association had been removed from the walls. Even his scent, Old Spice and kitchen smoke, had been erased by Gerald's aggressive cologne. "Sit," Gerald commanded, gesturing to the couch like I was a guest in my childhood home. I remained standing. "What's this about?" He pulled out a folder with the theatrical flair of a man who thought he was clever. "I sold Moretti's." The words didn't compute. They sat in the air like a foreign language, meaningless and strange. "You, what?" "Sold the restaurant. Found a buyer willing to pay well over market value. $3 million. Can you imagine? For that little place." "That little place," I said slowly, "is my father's legacy. And you can't sell it because you don't own it." Gerald's smile widened. He pulled out a document. "Actually, I do. When your mother and I married, all her assets became marital property, including her share of the restaurant. Her 49% share, I corrected. I own 51%. Dad left it that way specifically." He actually waggled his finger at me like I was a child. "But you're forgetting about the power of attorney." My stomach dropped. Mom wouldn't look at me. "Mom?" My voice came out small. "You didn't." "It was just for medical decisions," she whispered. "When I had the surgery last year," Gerald said. Gerald interrupted, "that a comprehensive POA would be better. Cover all bases. And as Linda's designated representative, I've agreed to sell her shares. Combined with a court order declaring you incompetent to run the business due to your age and inexperience. I'm 28. I have an MBA. I've run Moretti's for 5 years. You played restaurant while the adults weren't watching," he sneered. "But $3 million is real money. Time to let professionals handle things." "Who's the buyer?" "James Morrison. He owns that chain of sports bars. He's converting Moretti's into one of them. Already has plans drawn up. Big screen TVs, chicken wings, the works." I thought I might vomit. Dad's restaurant, where he proposed to Mom over handmade ravioli, where he taught me that food was love made tangible, turned into another generic sports bar. "The buyer's coming here tomorrow at noon to sign the final papers," Gerald continued. "I suggest you start clearing out your things from the office. Oh, and you're welcome to apply for a management position with the new owners. I'm sure they'd consider your experience." I stood on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Mom reached for me, but I stepped away. "Sophia, please understand," she begged. "Gerald knows about business. He said this was best for everyone." "Best for his bank account," I said flatly. I drove back to Moretti's in a daze. The dinner rush was in full swing, servers weaving between tables, the kitchen singing its nightly opera of sizzling pans and shouted orders. My staff, some who'd worked for Dad, who'd watched me grow up in this kitchen, smiled and waved. How could I tell them Gerald had sold their jobs to buy a vacation home? In my office, I stared at Dad's picture on the wall. Antonio Moretti, 1965 to 2018. He died in this restaurant, heart attack during the lunch rush, still trying to perfect his bolognese recipe. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered. I couldn't protect it. Then I saw it. The folder I picked up from the lawyer's office yesterday, still unopened on my desk. Richardson Hospitality Group. They'd been courting me for months, wanting to buy Moretti's. I'd said no every time. This was Dad's place, not for sale. But if it was going to be sold anyway, I opened the folder, read the offer, read it again. Then I made a call. "Mr. Richardson, it's Sophia Moretti. Are you still interested in purchasing the restaurant?" "Absolutely, but I thought you weren't selling." "Things change. Can you meet tonight?" "Name the time." We met at a 24-hour diner across town. Marcus Richardson was everything Gerald wasn't: respectful, knowledgeable about the restaurant industry, and most importantly, he had a vision for Moretti's that honored what it was. "I don't want to change anything," he assured me. "Moretti's is perfect. I just want to help it grow. Maybe open second locations, but the original stays exactly as it is. Same recipes, same staff, same soul." "And the price?" He slid a paper across the table. $3.5 million. "I can have a check by morning," he said. "I know it's fast, but I've had my lawyers ready for months, hoping you'd change your mind." I thought about Gerald's smug face, about Mom's betrayal, about James Morrison's sports bar chain. "I need the sale completed by 10 a.m. tomorrow." "Done." We shook hands. Then I did something I hadn't done since Dad died. I ordered a shot of whiskey and toasted the empty chair across from me. "Here's to you, Dad," and to Gerald, learning that inconvenient reminders can bite back. The next morning was a whirlwind. Lawyers, paperwork, bank transfers. By 10:30, I owned a check for $3.5 million, and Marcus Richardson owned Moretti's, with an ironclad contract keeping me as general manager, protecting all current employees and preserving the restaurant's legacy. At 11:45, I walked into my childhood home for the last time. Gerald had set up the dining room like a conference table. Legal pads, pens, coffee service. He wore his best suit, the one that screamed successful businessman to anyone who didn't look too close. "Sophia," he frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Wouldn't miss this for the world." "Well, you can't be here. This is a private business transaction." "About my father's restaurant, I think I'll stay." Before he could argue, the doorbell rang. Gerald practically ran to answer it, returning with James Morrison, mid-50s, polo shirt stretched over a beer gut. The kind of man who thought authentic Italian meant adding oregano to frozen pizza. "Jim." Come in, come in. Can I get you coffee, water?" "Just want to get this done," Morrison grunted. "I've got contractors ready to start demo on Monday." Demo. They were going to demolish Dad's work. Of course. Gerald spread out the contracts. "Now, as we discuss, $3 million for the property and business." "Actually," Morrison interrupted, pulling out his phone. "I need to check something. My accountant just sent me." He frowned at his screen. "This can't be right." "What's wrong?" Morrison showed Gerald his phone. "This shows Moretti's was sold yesterday to Richardson Hospitality Group." The color drained from Gerald's face. "That's impossible." "But I did sell it yesterday," I said helpfully. "To Marcus Richardson. For $3.5 million. The sale was finalized at 10:17 this morning." Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "You can't. You don't have the authority." "To sell my own property? Sure I do." I pulled out my copies of the contracts. "See, I own 51%. Controlling interest. I don't need anyone's permission. But I have power of attorney for your mother's shares." "Which means you can sell her 49%. I smiled sweetly. "To Jim here, if he wants to buy a minority stake in a restaurant you can't control, can't change, and can't profit from without my approval." Morrison's face was turning purple. "What kind of scam are you running, Gerald?" "It's not, she can't." "Linda." Gerald spun toward my mother, who'd been silent in a corner. "Tell her." Mom looked at me, then at Gerald, then at the contracts on the table. For the first time in years, I saw a flash of the woman who'd stood beside Dad building their dream. "I think," she said quietly, "that my daughter just outsmarted you, Gerald." "This is illegal." Gerald sputtered. "I'll sue." "For what?" I asked. Selling my own property. You're welcome to try selling Mom's minority stake, but good luck finding a buyer willing to pay millions for zero control. Morrison was already heading for the door. I'm done here. And Gerald? Expect to hear from my lawyer about the deposit you took. Deposit? Mom's voice sharpened. What deposit? Gerald's face went from red to white. Just earnest money. Standard practice. How much? Mom's voice could have frozen hell. 50,000, Morrison called over his shoulder. Non-refundable, he said, except when the seller commits fraud. The door slammed behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. You took $50,000? Mom's voice was deadly quiet. Without even owning what you were selling. I was about to own it. The plan was perfect until she. He pointed at me, rage distorting his features. You little bitch, you ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You ruined everything the day you decided to steal my father's legacy. I just refused to let you. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at my mother. Dad always said you judge a person by how they treat those who can't fight back. Gerald thought I couldn't fight back because I was young and grieving. He was wrong. Sophia, wait. Mr. Richardson is keeping all the staff, Mom. He's even giving them raises, and he's promised to keep Dad's recipes exactly as they are. Moretta's will live on, just not under our name, which is still better than Gerald's sports bar. I left them there, Gerald screaming about lawsuits and betrayal, Mom finally seeing the man she'd married for who he really was. That night, I stood in Moretti's kitchen one last time as owner. The staff threw an impromptu party, toasting the future and roasting Gerald's failed scheme. Marcus Richardson joined us, promising that nothing would change except their paychecks, for the better. Your father would be proud, said Tommy, our head chef who'd worked alongside Dad for 20 years. Not just of saving the restaurant, of how you did it, with class and brains just like he taught you. 6 months later, I used my share of the sale to open my own place, Sophia's. Modern Italian with a twist, just 5 blocks from Moretti's. Marcus was my first customer, bringing a bottle of champagne and a framed photo of Dad to hang in my office. Mom divorced Gerald after the forensic accountant she hired found more deposits he'd taken for things he didn't own. Turns out I wasn't his first attempted victim, just his first failure. She comes to Sophia's every Sunday now, sitting at the bar while I cook, telling stories about Dad I'd never heard. Sometimes we walk over to Moretti's afterward, where his picture still hangs in the entrance, watching over the recipes he perfected and the dream that survived despite Gerald's best efforts. I'm sorry, Mom said one evening, watching me prep for the dinner rush. For the power of attorney, for believing Gerald, for almost letting him destroy everything. You were grieving, I said, salting the pasta water. Gerald took advantage of that. But we saved it, Mom. That's what matters. She smiled, looking more like herself than she had in years. You saved it, by being smarter than all of us. Tony's right, your father would be so proud. I think about that sometimes when I'm elbow deep in orders, living my dream built on the ashes of Gerald's scheme. How Dad always said the secret ingredient in any dish was love, but the secret to business was brains. Turns out I inherited both. And Gerald? Last I heard, he was selling used cars in Tucson, still telling anyone who'd listen about the millions he almost made, if only his ungrateful stepdaughter hadn't ruined everything. I hope he tells that story forever. It's the only honest thing he's ever said. I did ruin everything. Everything he planned anyway.